So we're going to start the second part of the second session of the fourth Young Researchers Workshop on Terrorism and Belligerency, focused on human enhancement and advanced technologies in terrorism and belligerency. Usually we would have that workshop, the annual workshop, in the University of Haifa, but due to expected circumstances, we have to do it virtually, but actually that allows us to have interesting guests and interesting respondents, sometimes even through very, very short notice, which we are very, very thankful for. And we are actually very lucky that we do have that option available. So we're going to make the most out of it as part of this workshop. So I'm going to present now the next speaker and the respondent. The speaker will have about 20 to 30 minutes of presentation, and following that, the respondent will have 15 to 20 minutes time to address the paper and or the presentation. And following that, we're going to open the discussion to questions and comments from the roundtable and from the audience. So our next speaker is Ivan Ristov. Right? Yeah. Dr. Ivan Ristov received his bachelor degree in honors as the best student of Faculty of Security in Skopje, the Republic of North Macedonia. He later on continued to MA in Criminology and completed a PhD in International Security in 2020. His PhD focused on Turkish power projection towards the Balkans and the security implication, and the case study Republic of North Macedonia he completed it November 23rd, 2020. Ivan works, he is an independent thinker. He works in several positions, including at the Ministry of
Interior.
Ministry of Interior at North Macedonia. Thank you, Ivan. And he's currently in Geneva, so it makes us even more global than we expected to the reach of this workshop. And as a respondent, we have Dr. Leyla Tavernaro-Haidarian. All right? Okay. She's a consultant for various UN agencies. Her areas of expertise include communication, gender, ethics, and governance. She serves on the editorial board of the Journal of Deliberative Democracy and is a member of the International Association of Media and Communication Research, as well as the South African Academy of Science. For the Austrian Baha'i community, she manages the social discourse portfolio of its Office of Public Affairs, and she's affiliated with the University of Johannesburg. Okay, Ivan is going to talk about digital reality and spreading misknowledge, potential radicalization, and the need for 21st century skills. Ivan, the floor is yours.
Thank you for your introduction, Ido. It is my honor and a great privilege to be among the participants of this workshop. So let's start with the presentation of the paper. Firstly, this paper aims to theoretically define the new concept of digital reality in correlation with already known objective, subjective, and intersubjective reality. The second part of the paper targets current crisis of the international liberal order and the threat of radicalizations in democracies as a result. And the last part of the paper tries to define the new type of 21st century skills that will introduce the practical knowledge that every young person needs to possess to succeed in the new upcoming international order of digital age. So, we must understand contemporary reality that we live in as a complex composition of 4 different types of reality: objective, subjective, intersubjective, and digital reality. We can define objective reality as one that exists independently of human existence, regardless of our ideas, our beliefs, our feelings, our paradigms, or worldviews. As opposite to objective reality, there is a subjective reality. Subjective reality depends on our sensory reception of the objective world, our personal beliefs, our wishes and desires, our personality, our genetics, and our feelings. Depending on biology, genetics, and the different external inputs, every single human being produces his unique subjective reality. On the other hand, intersubjective reality exists purely in people's common imagination. The world is a place of distribution of ideas, where shared ideas create intersubjectivity. Intersubjective reality directly depends on human existence, communication, and sharing of ideas. The meaning of this reality is created when many people weave together a common web of stories. Such web of stories or web of meanings incorporate beliefs, values, norms, attitudes, paradigms, stereotypes, prejudices, theories, identities, ideologies, myths, religion, folklore, etc. But the time that we live in cannot be explained only by the former three types of realities alone. It is necessary to create a new type of reality that will theoretically respond to the changes that are occurring due to the information technology and the big data revolution. My theoretical concept in this paper is that there is a fourth type parallel to the existence three type of reality, or so-called digital reality. I define digital reality as a genuinely new type of projected reality that exists in cyberspace as a parallel coexisting reality. This theoretical concept, I explained it as a multifaceted, digitally connected entity, driven largely by artificial intelligence and algorithms, created and owned mainly by technological corporations, built by all the data found in cyberspace, including activity on social networks, chat rooms, IRC channels, and other type of communication platform software, internet blogs, browsers, web pages, and other software solutions, including deep web and dark web. This reality is constantly changing and is expanding as a result of the human production of new data. Every human being has access to digital reality through any type of smart devices as a medium that can alter its senses. The access and the interaction to each person with the digital reality depends on the types and numbers of smart devices that he is using, the browsers that he is using, search engines, geographic or physical location from where he is connected, the type of algorithms that he's been targeted by, his information literacy, previous dominant intersubjective realities, etc. This type of data that we produce is constantly used by the AI algorithms in guided and individually shaped targeting, with only a small portion of digital reality that has been specially designed for us. These individual and unique engagements can create, shape, and differ our subjective and intersubjective reality and our understanding of the world. The key question that arises is, what are the implications of the existence of digital reality? In the paper, I analyzed the implications of the existence of digital reality according to the connection with other types of reality and how it affects them. For example, digital and intersubjective and subjective reality. Connection with different targeted portion of digital reality directly affects the shaping of our subjective self. The connection with digital reality and the contents to which we are exposed create our subjective reality, reinforces or rejects our previous attitudes, beliefs, values, and ideas, and create new needs that directly affect our motivations, desires, and interests. For example, AI algorithms based on previously obtained data about people, analyzed and processed by comparing wishes, preferences, and interests of people who match their profile, are constantly targeting different people with different content designed specifically for them. Combining the constant flow of data with the previous activity, pages visited, searches, pictures, videos, profiles that he's visiting, likes, share, clicks, the algorithms produces new and shaped portion of digital reality, closing the circle that turns into a constant moving spiral of a shaped and directed portion of digital reality. What's important is every output of new portion of digital reality can potentially contain disinformation, false facts, fake news, propaganda, deepfake, contextually targeted text, modified images, videos, and sound that will result with creating ignorance and misknowledge that is embedded in the subjective reality of the targeted individual. Knowledge as a power is effectively used by corporations that possesses powerful algorithms, and social networks is in controlling and directing society, intervening directly in the social construction of reality. The second interaction is between digital and intersubjective reality. The speed of sharing content and ideas changed the way in which the intersubjective reality is constructed. The digital intersubjective reality is drastically different from the conventional one. In conventional everyday life, people tend to associate with people who share their worldview, people who know them and who are close to them. But there are no rules in digital reality. There are no physical, no geographical, no ideological, and no identity restrictions. In short, digital reality connects people with different worldviews much closer than they would come into contact within objective reality, albeit contrary to conventional logic, resulting in increased hate speech, even deeper division and radicalization, and strengthening of one worldview. Because everyone has access to their own digital reality, sharing their ideas gives them power they simply did not previously have in conventional, objective, everyday life. Every person can now generate powerful ideas through a digital reality that can overnight change the intersubjective reality in which a group of people live, including entire countries and nations. The second part of the paper examines the current crisis of the international liberal order and the threat of radicalization in democracies as a result. The creation of the international liberal order after the Cold War involved several main tasks: expand the membership in the international institutions that made up the Western order in the Cold War, create an open and inclusive international economy, and vigorously spread liberal democracy around the world. Why is this important? To understand why Western political leaders try to spread the liberal ideology in all of the countries in the world and what went wrong, we must observe the contemporary reality as we previously stated as an objective, subjective, intersubjective, and digital. People like to tell stories about their lives and they tend to understand their life as if they are stories. So the best way to understand people's subjective reality is as a story. On the other hand, as we argued above, intersubjective reality exists purely in our common imagination. Liberalism as an ideology is an intersubjective reality. When people are possessed by an ideology, all the people have the same idea. If all the people have the same idea, what makes us think that they have the idea? It may be the other way around. The point is that ideas matter and ideas can change the world, particularly when they are written. We've seen this in the brief time of unipolarity after the Cold War. The United States were free to impose the dominant intersubjective reality or liberal democracy ideology on other countries, imposing liberalism, bringing democracy by military force in the greater Middle East, trying to change the dominant web of meaning and intersubjective reality of the people in targeted country, only inflamed nationalism, radicalization, and gave rise of the far right in Europe, producing a huge economic crisis. In the last year, the COVID-19 pandemic only helped superspeeding the flows in the system. In my opinion, there are very simple reasons why this is happening. First, it is much easier to inflame nationalism and to radicalize citizens to already existing national myths and stories than to impose different intersubjective reality, or liberalism, so to speak, to a targeted population. Second, the international institutions tend to affect the behavior of the member states. By creating strong institutions and delegating the authority and the power to make decisions to them, people in the member countries' state started to feel that very principles of democracy are ruined, or so-called democratic deficit, resulting in bureaucracy filled with incompetence and corruption. As bureaucracies accumulated power, they became immune to their own mistakes. Instead of changing their stories to fit reality, they started to change reality to fit their stories. And the third one, economic interdependence and forced hyperglobalization produced problems in the liberal state in the system. The rich got richer and the poor got poorer, as the Matthew effects refer, and also led to the impressive growth of China's economy, which helped China becoming a great power, undercutting unipolarity, which is a conditio sine qua non for establishing and maintaining a liberal international order. So today, the liberal international order is in the middle of a global information war that is going on constantly, and it's losing. There are more and more examples of young people radicalized by an ideology different than the dominant intersubjective reality of their home countries. To understand what the future holds and to explain the turning point in international relations and radicalization of the population, we must take into account the empowerment of the individuals through digital reality. Governments, non-state actors, and individuals are creating and spreading narratives that have nothing to do with objective reality. Those false and misleading narratives undermine democracy and the ability of free people to make intelligent choices. Digital reality will only strengthen people's confirmation bias with every single new exposure to it. Targeted portion of digital reality will result in a large group of people victims of propaganda, misinformation, deepfake, and fake news with a poorly shaped worldview. Individual empowerment, diffusion of state power, large technological corporations, and their marginalization of the market, or the end of the market as we know, and multipolarity will create a new hard realist order. In this new international order, disinformation will rapidly erode people's trust. Although disinformation is not a new game, spreading disinformation through digital reality is a massive leap beyond any formal rules, barriers, and gatekeepers of playing dirty. So the questions are, what can be done to stop effectively spreading disinformation through digital reality? Can we regulate digital reality? Can troll armies and bots be stopped by some kind of barriers or state-imposed rules or sanctions? Who will be responsible for judging the narratives? Who will make the decision of what is true or what is a lie? And what about spreading lies as a result of ignorance? Can we kill the diversity of opinions? Can we censor what we don't like? For now, we cannot effectively regulate digital reality. Troll armies and bots cannot be stopped by some kind of barriers or state-imposed rules or sanctions. States cannot kill the diversity of opinions, and governments cannot censor what they don't like. It seems that every individual will continue to be responsible for judging the narratives and will continue to make the decisions of what they think is true or not. That's why young people will need a complex knowledge or a 21st century skill set as a tool to fight against becoming victims of targeted and shaped portion of digital reality. In the last part of the paper, I divided the new skills into 9 connected categories: thinking, changes and trends, human needs and motivations, habits and rituals, scientific knowledge and methodology, the intelligence cycle, innovation, collaboration, and communication. In the interest of time, I won't be elaborating any further. I'm looking forward to your questions and your comments. Thank you for your patience and for listening to me.
So, Leyla, the floor is yours for the response.
Thank you so much. And thank you for this presentation about a topic that is extremely timely, and for offering an approach into the subject that is also clearly aimed to be solution-driven. The themes are very interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and you're drawing from a very wide range of insights. You define digital reality as a new type of projected reality that not only coexists, but also is deeply interwoven with other realities. It speaks to, is informed by, and informs all these other realities. And you explore this relationship in your second part, showing us how our engagement with digital reality can affect those realities and can lead to an entrenchment of views and to radicalization. Before I provide a few notes that I think will be helpful, I want to ask one small question that you didn't mention in the presentation explicitly, but which was in the paper, and you can answer this perhaps later. But it interested me, and it was about the distinction between digital truth and digital lie. And I'd like to understand further how you define those, or why searches, browses, clicks, views were defined as truth, digital truth, and posts, likes, search, shares, and social media or social network activities were constituted as digital lies. But perhaps you can tell me this later. But overall, I look forward also to you fleshing out the latter part, the third part of your paper, which is the suggested 21st century skills that young people, but anybody really working within this digital reality should be looking at. Because at the moment, it seems a little bit separate. And I know it's still developing, and it will become clearer how those 9 categories that you mentioned have been chosen. But I think it's going to be very important to use those 9 points and build on the first part of your article to identify how the categories you suggest speak to those ideas. In order to provide some further, hopefully stimulating thoughts on this journey, I'll make a few points that you may wish to consider, and that may possibly down the line feature in the skills part, the third part of your article anyway. The first point is about, I think, a phrase that you used where you said, research shows that if a country is technologically and scientifically developed, has a higher rate of education and culture with a high set of values and moral norms, then it is more resistant to the projection of disinformation. And that's a very interesting comment, but it would be helpful to understand, how do we define how much culture a country has, or how high its values and morals are? By whose standard are we defining these things? There's a lot of research, for example, from the Global South and from the experiences of the international community, from UN organizations, that shows that technological and scientific development alone are highly problematic when they're not driven by human capacity, by these intangible things that you are placing into the intersubjective reality, which are spiritual, moral, ethical dimensions. And so I think this moral, ethical, values-driven dimension can be pronounced and discussed further. I think it's a very important part of this discussion. Along with this, it's also valuable to look at how do we create the spaces for these dimensions to be considered and cultivated. So for people who are either formally educated or not educated, to develop those capacities, to think about those ethical implications, to be able to reflect on their own insights, to share them with others so they can actively co-shape their various realities, including digital reality, and to turn it into something that is sustainable and beneficial to humans and the planet, rather than something that sidelines people and is chiefly profit-driven, which is what we see so much of in the world today. And what is interesting also is, I think, an opportunity for us to perhaps question this idea of objectivity a little bit, or perhaps move away from the idea of neutrality and objectivity being achievable in the first place, towards the idea of perhaps cultivating self-reflection or self-reflexive subjectivity. So understanding our biases better, understanding what has shaped our thinking, and constantly bringing these subjectivities openly to the fore, so that we're cultivating a willingness to learn from others, whether it's in the digital space, in other spaces, and help develop the capacity to really be open to changing our mind. So using our diversity of thought as something that can be valuable and not necessarily divisive. Another very interesting point you raised is this great transformation that occurred over the last 100 to 200 years, where we've seen an exponential rise in technological advancements that have essentially brought the world together in practical terms. Meaning that if something happens in one part of the world, it very quickly affects another part of the world. We're very interdependent in that way. And yet, if we look closely, this Western liberal kind of culture that has been, and you called it, basically, imposed upon so much of the world, in these Western liberal societies, they are still premised largely on pre-industrial and industrial age values, and not on values that really speak to and reflect this highly interwoven reality that we live in. We still structure social organization, democracies, economies as a contest of power rather than as power sharing, which would suit the needs of our age much better. So again, bringing in this idea of what are the values that inform our social organization, and really questioning those assumptions that we take for granted that we're not questioning. How do we develop and advance social organization further? What's the next stage in evolution? And this speaks to that crisis of the liberal order that you mentioned, because this adversarial system that we see also helps deepen the divides that we're seeing amplified perhaps in the digital space. And often I believe it has to do with the fact that in the digital space, if it's not a forum like today where we have faces and we are somewhat familiar with one another, you have this kind of sense of a person, and you feel much more comfortable to say things. Sorry, do you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, because I'm hearing things in my earphones. So putting a face and creating a space where people can exchange ideas in a way that is more accessible. This is very important. A few more ideas. I think I still have a few more minutes. I'd like to also offer, and I think this is not something you're explicitly mentioning at all in the paper, but it's something I think that has an effect or is implied in your paper, is this idea of development really thinking about what does development mean, and perhaps rethinking development and sustainable development, which has so far focused very strongly on financial and technological resource development. We think of countries as being developed when they have developed those capacities, instead of looking at perhaps individuals and communities, so people. We still attribute this ability to create change to the agency of institutions and structures rather than people. And it's mostly people and communities who must become protagonists of their own development and also feed into the various realities that they're shaping, including the digital realm. So looking at, and I think, again, in the last part of your paper, you would be looking at communication, for example, as one of your 9 headings, looking at how do we create and foster participatory consultative spaces and opportunities for people at all levels to be involved in reading social reality and reading digital reality and allowing their voices to flow into the design of digital technologies and reflecting and cultivating that kind of reflection on these things. And these spaces can be physical and virtual. You know, there are a lot of examples of constructive conversations that are happening in the digital space. It's not all bad. So the question is, what are the elements that make those spaces work? What type of deep listening is required and fostered there? What type of respectful and reflexive communication is nurtured, and how? And the last sort of point I'll mention before I summarize perhaps 2 main notes that I'd like to just leave off with. The last point is also to consider alternative understandings and notions of power. I know that in the West, the global North, we focus a lot on, and you mentioned Foucault as well in your paper, we think about power as that which is, it's almost a dirty word, as that which is material. So armaments, money, resources, and we think of it as that which is wielded against others to dominate them, even if it's, with their best interest in mind. And certainly this type of power is exercised and it's problematic sometimes, very often. But there are also other ways of conceptualizing power. Power as force, for example, power as co-creation. Power is that which empowers others and multiplies the more it includes others. And I think redefining some of these terms, considering these kinds of things, these notions of power, for example, is very, very necessary when we want to look at reshaping digital spaces, digital realities, and empowering people to be able to move in these spaces. So I think the main 2 points from all these different things that I've said that I would want to, if nothing else, that you walk away with is, one is making sure that when you are developing the 3rd part of your paper, it's really coherently following from the first 2 parts, so that we really understand where are those 9 elements coming from, what motivated them, and also questioning, do we need all 9, or do you want to focus on 1 or 2? So being very, very focused in that part. And then the second big note perhaps would be, again, to just reconsider the merit of objective reality and to say, well, how can we use the fact that we have so many subjective realities to our benefit, and to say we'll collaborate to navigate the space better, to make better informed choices, and make the digital space work for us. Thank you.
So thank you, Leyla. Ivan, I think at the beginning, Leyla had a question to you about true information and false information.
Digital truths and lies, I think. Yeah. In the paper, I mentioned about digital truth and digital lies. Let me just, I said that our engagement with digital reality can be roughly divided into two parts. Digital truth, that is searches, browsing, clicks, views, swipes, and digital posts, likes, shares, social network activity, dating profiles, etc. So why is one a lie? Why is the other the truth? It's a very simple answer about we want to present ourselves in digital space in our best version, not to expose our flaws, only to amplify our advantages. I think that's the main reason why is one a digital truth and why is the other a digital lie. So that's my answer. Short answer.
Just a very short little thing. Then likes could be both, in my opinion. No, they could be truthful and not.
Yeah. I think the algorithm. I think the algorithms can recognize what is a true and what is a lie. So. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Leyla. And now we move with Zeno.
Thank you, and thank you, Ivan, for your presentation. My question concerns basically your conclusion, because you pointed out that the collision of these intersubjective realities in the digital reality can cause extremism and violence and even terrorism, if I understood correctly. And basically your conclusion was that these 21st century skills are to be taught and they are to be shared within the new generations. And these 21st century skills may help us to combat these threats. I think that the most extreme example of extremist ideology in action is terrorism. And in Europe, the classic way of committing terrorist attacks is assassinations in public places. And these attacks are usually committed by individuals, separate, lonely assassins. And in most cases, they are kind of outsiders in a society. So basically, even if they get some kind of education, they feel that they are not part of this subjective or intersubjective reality. So my question is, do you think that teaching these 21st century skills alone can be effective in counterterrorism? Or do you think that, for instance, regulating the internet should be an answer? Because if I know where the internet, Facebook, social media sources like Instagram use filters and algorithms and machine learning, so it isolates its users and it narrows the interest. And this can cause, for instance, extremist ideology to spread. So do you think that this 21st century skills enough to combat these extremist, violent ideologies to spread? Or do you think that regulation is needed on the internet? And of course, it means that the freedom of speech and freedom of opinion should be somehow regulated on the internet.
I think the answer is both combined. From the other side, from the one side, internet should be regulated. It's a need for better regulation on the internet. On the other side, there is a need for 21st century skills. But I think the examples that you mentioned about people that commit terrorist activity, it's a result of not belonging to a group, not belonging to a part of some group, as a Maslow pyramid of needs suggests, that every person needs to be loved and need to feel a part of some groups. Those young individuals does not belong to any group or belong to a radicalized group. They live in different intersubjective reality than the state they're living, and the dominant intersubjective reality of the state they live in. Okay.
I will allow myself to ask the question. Probably Ido is not there for the moment.
Yeah, Ido is not here anymore.
So yeah, but we are grown up, so we can do that. And thank you, Ivan, for your paper. Actually, it was again so refreshing to read something written not by a lawyer, and I envy you this possibility of writing some words without need to define them. And I think I will comment on our previous, I'm sorry, it's Zeno. How to pronounce your name? I'm so sorry.
Zeno,
okay. Comment, because I actually understood something totally different from your paper. And I have to say, I was also disappointed when the third part was not there, because, for example, this misinformation for me, it's not something linked with terrorism. And when you were writing about far right, far left radicalization, what I was thinking was something that is happening now, at least in Poland, of course. And you just briefly mentioned Russian misinformation. And I was a bit surprised that you just mentioned that and focus on other ideas as actually for Poland and in this part of Europe, and of course North Macedonia as well. This is a big problem. And actually, I'm looking forward for your full version of the article, because I have this question for you, which is a very complicated one. For sure, you won't give me a ready-made answer. But I'm, for example, having classes with first-year students of law, and they are called self-development methods. And one part of this class is how to distinguish misinformation from information, how to deal with the digital world, and how to find yourself inside of this new reality, which you are calling digital reality. And those skills were not developed in the paper, but my question is, how can we actually, as human beings, as individuals, distinguish this misinformation? And I assume that this misinformation can come also from the state, from, I don't know, like, let's say, anti-vaccination groups, and other extremist groups, which are not only aimed at killing and injuring people, but making a chaos and mess in public opinion and in public debate. And actually, myself, I was never taught that, because our professors were not living in digital reality, and we have to do it on our own. And maybe you could at least recommend some reading. There is this Shoshana, I have this book somewhere, this new data marketing, a big book. I saw you were citing Noah Harari, and so what would you say, how to bring those skills to people, where to look for the truth, etc.? That's my question, very complicated one. And how to teach people those skills, because teachers also have to be taught.
My short answer will be as a subject in university. So different curriculum with that is addressing this type of skills.
So each type of studies, medicine, law, political science, mathematics, they should have
should include this curriculum. Yeah, because doesn't matter is it a medical student or a law student or a police academy. Everybody connects to digital reality. Everybody should know how to notice misinformation and disinformation. There are some rule of thumbs that you could use in everyday life. For example, in which source came the information, who's the targeted person, and who's the author of the information. But there are only rule of thumbs. Mm-hmm. It cannot teach you how to perfectly detect disinformation and misinformation.
Okay, so I'm looking forward to reading your article, and we'll put it on curriculum of this course. Okay, thank you.
So we move with Fabiano.
I really thought the presentation was very balanced and refreshing, especially given how much this subject can be highly politicized very quickly. And I think one interesting, I don't know if I misinterpret your presentation, and not that you were saying that explicitly, but one thing that it seems to be often neglected, at least a lot in the US discussions, is how there is a good side of the fact that people now can reject expert opinion and make their own opinions, even though, of course, overall, the conspiracy theories and so on are bad and horrible things for society. But it is in part due to the fact that they are more educated and they can find papers and research for themselves. And that is a good thing. And I think if we can sort of build on that, and I feel like a framework like yours, we could use that so that people can sort of construct their own knowledge. And I mean, you haven't actually given your overall solution. I'm also curious to see what you would propose, but it seems to be more focused on a more constructing your own knowledge and being aware of misinformation than so much sort of a sharp contrast between expert opinion and those people who are misinformed and they need to be shut up. Not that perhaps they shouldn't be shut up, but I mean, if paired with the access that those people have to medical studies and so on, they can also they have sort of epistemological tools to build their own knowledge better and be aware of misinformation. I think that would be a great sort of advancement. And so I would want to see if you develop a framework, one that capitalizes on that. I mean, that's my wish, of course. And another thing that's sort of another philosopher comment, going on with my comments to Kaya's presentation. It's not clear to me how the digital it's different from the objective and subjective, because it seems the digital can be objective if it's scientifically studied, but it can also be a medium for storing subjective experiences, and maybe one day even a medium for living subjective experiences in them. But it doesn't seem like it is an additional dimension other than objective and subjective. Although maybe it would be useful to separate them, but at least for a philosopher, like in this substantive terms, it doesn't seem like it's different from them.
The main difference why is digital reality separate than subjective and objective reality is because in digital reality there is an artificial intelligence involved. Algorithms that target us are part of artificial intelligence. They are programmed by humans, but they have artificial intelligence. So the artificial intelligence is targeting us, is shaping our worldview, is shaping our values, shaping our subjective reality. That's the difference from this reality from the other types of reality, because of the artificial intelligence. In the objective world, there is no artificial intelligence. There are only other humans that you can talk to. But on digital reality, there is other humans and artificial intelligence. So that's the main difference. Okay.
Okay. Before we give Leyla the floor, I want to take the privilege of the moderator and ask you a question. Well, it seems that you're talking about a lot of education as a key element, education and communication as key elements to improve the situation on the digital sphere. But as you probably noticed, we come a little bit from, some of us, from a legal point of view. And what I'm trying to understand is that, for me, it's clear that there is a need for some kind of regulation here, right?
I agree with you.
Now, at the Minerva Center, we had some research done about the rule of law under extreme conditions and modalities of regulations. And there is this nice theory, very interesting theory by Amnon Reichman, who will be with us tomorrow as a respondent, Professor Amnon Reichman and Professor Oda Haber, who are talking about modalities of regulations. And they're talking about something like 6 or 8 modalities of regulations, which include freedom of information, licensing, civil liability or criminal liability, taxation and subsidy, and insurance, and also international overview. So it seems to me that within these modalities, although you're not necessarily aiming for them, you're focusing a lot of freedom of information, providing freedom of information and let the public out of conscious decision, out of conscious decision. But I think, and we talked a little bit about it before we started today's sessions, that it's easier to spread lies than the truth. You have the truth is the truth, lies is everything that is not the truth, pretty much by definition, right?
Lies brings money to corporations.
Well, sometimes truth can be useful as well. I'm not saying truth is bad for companies, but and you actually, you mentioned the Facebook whistleblower who said that hate speech and hate propaganda are actually beneficial to Facebook. But the question is freedom of information enough in your view, or should we also look at other modalities? That's one. And the second one, you refer a lot to education of either young people or students, refer to Kaya's question. But wouldn't that still miss out huge groups, marginal groups, and usually the problems come from marginal groups. As we go to the extreme, these are the marginal groups. Now, if you look at higher education and even secondary education, there are a lot of people excluded from that opportunity, and they still would be subjected to digital misinformation or misknowledge, but they won't have the tools to deal with it. Nevertheless, so education might be a key or one of the tools for dealing with that, but we do need more tools than the ones that you refer to, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree with you. We need regulation on of the internet, but if we impose some kind of rules, corporations can always cheat, can always break the rules. That's why the other component about empowerment people is, I think, in my opinion, is better. Regulations, yes, but also empowerment of the people with specific type of knowledge. As we see from the whistleblower just a few weeks ago about Facebook, what she said is that Facebook as a company is constantly breaking their own rules. Yeah.
Still, let me push you a little bit back. You said they can cheat and they can error. If they control the regulation, and sometimes they do control the regulation, especially in countries where money equals freedom, free speech, as it is in the US, for example. But even if you go to classic literature about controlling information, 1984, right? This is what we're talking about, control over information, which leads to education and knowledge. So if, as a regulator, I take advantage of that, of misinformation, which helps me as the ruler, then who can control the regulator? If the regulator has an incentive to keep things on the misinformation and misknowledge and digital false, who will regulate it then?
who will watch us from the watchers. So
yeah,
I agree with you. I don't have the answer.
And we see you refer to Trump in your paper. I mean, you refer to Trump.
Yeah.
And he's not the only one, right? He wasn't the only one dealing with that. So, and that was the regulator. So if the regulator is taking advantage of misinformation, we need a different tool. We need an extended tool that will allow us to do it.
I'm so sorry, I'm just breaking in, but this is like typical discussion. Misinformation is our common challenge, and those all forms of eroding law through companies and state. Then we have just promotion of civil society and giving money to people to educate. But this also can be corrupted. And it's a very pessimistic conclusion that you are bringing. I don't agree. Please shed some light.
But companies and regulators will always have more money than civil society. Yeah. Leyla, please.
These are huge discussions. They could go in so many different ways. And I think that one of the things that will be important for you, Ivan, is to then also be very specific in your paper and to say, look, this is what I'm going to focus on. I will not be focusing on this for whatever reason. I will be focusing on the educational side as one of many sort of things that have to be considered. And you know, even in the light of the insufficiency of educational measures alone, because I do believe there's a space for grassroots empowerment and all sorts of things. None of these things actually matter if we're not raising people who are decent. You know, no amount of education and no amount of regulation is going to prevent people from doing the wrong thing if we're not, you know, creating truthfulness or cultivating this from early childhood to be decent human beings and to foster some kind of moral values. But what is the role that you want to be focusing on? And if we're looking at educational tools, I think one of the very interesting things you can also look at, just for some ideas, is this open source toolkit that the UNODC has been developing and making available, called Education for Justice, where they're also looking at digital reality, how to use it, ethics and integrity, what kind of programs they can make available at all levels of education, including primary, secondary, but also tertiary. And you can be using these for so many different things. So these are all very interesting things to refer to.
And thank you for your comment.
We also have another question from the audience. So the question is about the connection between the radicalization of different groups of population to social inequality and disparities. How do you offer to treat in social aspects of radicalization and extremism in contemporary society? That's a question you can read in the Q&A. If you want to...
I'm currently reading it, but I can't quite understand the question. Connection between radicalization of different groups of population to social inequality and disparities.
I think if I understand correctly, it's about the extremism in the marginal society.
Well, we can observe the marginalized group as a group that lives in different intersubjective reality than the others or the other population that lives in. Marginalized groups has their own values, their own needs, their own perspectives. They live in different worldview. They have a different worldview than the other types of population in the same country. So they can easily be radicalized by offering content that is way closer to their already constructed intersubjective reality. You can only radicalize them with spreading hate and spreading misinformation that is close to their constant intersubjective reality that they live in. Every marginalized group is different from other. They all live in different intersubjective reality. Is it a marginalized group because of the lack of money, or is the marginalized group by a sexual orientation or different religion? Doesn't matter. It's different intersubjective reality that they are living. So by amplifying the hate and the disinformation in their intersubjective reality, you can radicalize them way easier. I think that's my kind of answer for that question.
See, Fabiano has another question. Please, Fabiano.
So just sorry to come back with my question, but we might comment about the digital side of things. I was thinking about a paper from 1998. I don't know what they would be saying right now, but it's a paper by two philosophers, Andy Clark and David Chalmers, called it the extended mind. And they say that back then, before Facebook and so much internet, if you type in, for example, your paper on your computer and it's stored there on the hard drive, that becomes part of your mind. It is as much part of yourself as what you have when you're stored in your memory. The difference is that you need to be sit down there accessing your computer to see your paper. And it seems that the kind of AIs that they use in Facebook, they are not that autonomous. They don't have real agency. So I really can't see how they create a really different class of things. It seems to be just more of extended mind. It's just there's a collective work there. And I don't know if somehow the algorithm causes some kind of, it's proven to cause some kind of crime, which of course it would be hard to do. The people who would pay for it would be actual people. We wouldn't put the algorithm in jail or anything like that. So how far is really true that there is this different class of things like the digital, and even calling it digital seems weird. So how about like a factory that runs on some kind of automated program? You can have kind of AI managing these machines as well, and it might be running on analog tape. Of course, it will be extremely hard to do that, and but it doesn't seem like it's really a different thing that we have now, call it digital, and this is different from the objective and the subjective. So it's my impression as a philosopher. Of course, it might be a valid class of things to call digital anyway.
Okay, please send me a link if you have from this article. I would like to read it. I haven't read that article that you mentioned from the two philosophers. Okay.
We can't hear you though.
Now you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Almost 2 years of Zooming, I think I should be aware of that. Thank you for that discussion. I think that concludes the discussion unless anyone has another comment for Ivan. Thank you very much, Ivan, for a great presentation. Thank you, Leyla, for your response. Thank you, everybody, for a very, very interesting discussion, very lively discussion, very current discussion. And I think that concludes the talk on this paper. We're gonna reconvene tomorrow for another session of the workshop with 2 more very interesting presentations. And the last day of the workshop will be on Wednesday. So I think everyone here is in the evening hours this time. So have a nice evening, and I will see you again tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.